begin today with acknowledgement of the traditional owners, and we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land wherever we are all coming from today, and to pay our respects to their elders, past, present and future, and to recognise their continuing connection to and care for the land where we all live today. The Inclusive Community Development Network has an idea that we sort of kicked off a few years ago to try and encourage collaborative practice, cooperation, sharing information and knowledge. Many of us working in the disability sector are very conscious of just how divided and competitive a lot of the organisations are in this space, including the community development space. And we all know from the principles of community development that collaboration is a must, that cooperation and working together and sharing ideas is the only way we really can make difference. So our series of forum this year are to try and encourage cooperation and collaboration around community work, particularly in the area of developing communities that are more inclusive of people with disability. We try to, in our forums, bring an academic or a research experience to the issue. We try and bring the experience of people who practice in the area of work that we're talking about, and we also really value the contribution of the lived experience of people with disabilities. And we think that those three areas or insights into an issue are really helpful in helping us dig a bit deeper and do more sort of deeper thinking about some of the issues that face us as we try and create more inclusive communities. The series this year is called Local Communities, Local Organising, Local Action, Global Influence. And it's based on the idea that we think really good change processes need a grassroots foundation to drive the work and to make sure it's connected to community and connected to people's lived experience. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to David Hanson. David Hanson's a community development team leader in our team at Valid in the Northeast Metro area. And David's had a lot to do with the topic we're looking at today. And so I'll hand over to him to be our MC for the rest of the session.
Thanks, David. Now, before I introduce our speakers today, I'd like to open with a question. Has political literacy been adequately emphasised or facilitated in our society? In 2013, the Department of Education in England highlighted the importance of political literacy for the benefit of its own society, and I quote, "Citizenship education should foster pupils' keen awareness and understanding of democracy, government, and how laws are made and upheld. Teaching should equip pupils with the skills and knowledge to explore political and social issues critically, to weigh evidence, debate, and make reasoned arguments," end quote. So what does that tell us? It tells us that political literacy is integral to any conversation on citizenship. And how do we as citizens hold on to the rights we've fought so hard for? And how do we change what is unjust and exclusive? Knowledge, digging deeper, sharing ideas, having robust discussions, and a little stroll through the garden of political literacy can add fuel to the fire that burns in the heart of those in advocacy and those wanting to improve inclusivity in our communities. When our keynote speaker, Emily Bieber, a social policy teacher at La Trobe University, offered to teach an inclusive and accessible short course about political literacy, Lucy Holden at the Watsonian Neighbourhood House knew who to call: the Banyul Darebin Peer Action Group, or PAG, as we like to call them. And the PAG members knew full well that creating opportunities to unravel the complexities of the legal system, to unpack the tools that are needed to pick away at governance on all levels of government, can serve as the guiding handrail that can show the way to climb the mountain of inclusivity that our communities still strive for today. Emily welcomed the group to design the course, and it's been well received by our community leaders. Without much further ado, I'd like to introduce Lucy Holden and Emily Bieber. Lucy Holden has been manager of the Watsonian Neighbourhood House for 6 years, where she's been actively involved in supporting the Banyul Darebin Peer Action Group. During her tenure, she has created an inclusive and welcoming place for the local community and developed a range of programs that facilitate positive, meaningful connections and strengthen community resilience. Originally from a background in arts and finance, Lucy has developed strong foundations for work in the community sector through volunteer roles in governance, project delivery and international community development projects in Cambodia. She has formal qualifications in community development and community sector management. Lucy is a board member of the Northeast Neighbourhood House Network and is passionate about social justice and inclusion. Thank you, Lucy. I'll also introduce Emily while I'm here. Emily Bieber is a social worker and children's counsellor. She lectures in counselling and social policy at La Trobe University. She's a member of a political party and has run for local council. A proud mother of 3, Emily sees political literacy as essential knowledge that everyone needs to access and understand. Politics and policy making affects every facet of our lives: housing, health, education, family, employment. Emily spent many years working as a case manager in the fields of homelessness, family violence, and mental health. These communities have very low political literacy and engagement, and it's time to increase voter turnout for all. Lucy and Emily, welcome.
Thank you, David. That's quite an introduction. Thank you. So thank you, everyone. It's lovely to see so many people here today and all of you interested in our political literacy program. I guess for me, one of the key elements of community development and inclusive community development is looking at the strengths that we have existing in our community and how we harness those strengths and bring them together to make positive change in our community. And I agree also with David's comments earlier about being about collaboration and cooperation. So I think this project, this political literacy project, is actually a really great example of our work. So we're really happy to be able to talk to you about it today. I first met Emily during the local council elections last year. Emily actually ran for election in the ward in which I live. And I'm interested in politics and I'm very engaged in the community. And so I contacted Emily because I wanted to chat to her about what her priorities were and talk to her about my priorities in the community and things that were of interest to me, and to work out whether our values aligned. And it turns out they do. But following that, we'd also been talking within the Banyul Darebin Peer Action Group about doing a letter writing campaign to the candidates that were in Banyul. So when I say letter writing campaign, emails. So we sent emails out to all of the candidates asking questions about how they might represent the interests of people with disability, but also other vulnerable groups. And we also offered our expertise as a group. So for the candidates, if they wanted to contact us to ask any questions or sort of be guided in their policies or the work that they were doing. And this was really telling. So all the candidates that we sent emails to, there were quite a lot that we didn't hear from, that we didn't get anything from. There were some that sent, a nice, polite, thank you for your email, pre-standard response. And there were some that gave some really great, considered, engaged responses to our questions. And also we had some candidates that sought meetings with us. So we had some good meetings as well with those candidates. So it was a really good process, I think, for the peer action group to be engaged in that process. And there were some really great outcomes, I think, for us. So I would really encourage other peer action groups or other groups to get on board with doing those sorts of campaigns in their community as well. After the campaign, after the election had finished, Emily contacted me to discuss the fact that her observation during her campaigning was that there was broadly across the community, there was a pretty low level of understanding of government and politics in general, who different political parties were, what they meant, what the values were. She found that broadly across the community. And she talked to me about whether there would be some opportunity or interest at the neighbourhood house to potentially deliver some workshops. And of course, my answer to that was, yes, that's a fabulous idea. And I thought it would also be great to build on the work that the Banyul Peer Action Group had already done with their letter writing campaign. And so it would be a really great group to be able to offer this sort of workshop and this information to. I think it's really important to be able to build the skills for people to be able to advocate on their own behalf And I think understanding about how to engage in politics and how to be a political person, how to have their exercise their right to active citizenship, I think is really important. And so this project was born. Maybe I'll hand over to Emily now to tell you about more about the project.
Thanks, Lucy.
Thanks, Lucy. Thanks, David. It's nice to meet you all and see all these wonderful smiling faces. I'm in Viewbank, which is kind of near the Austin Hospital, and I've got my best lockdown hoodie on, so I really dressed up for the occasion. There's no food stains down the front. So I've got some PowerPoint slides to share with you in a sec, but I was just thinking about what you said, Lucy, about the way that you went about approaching all those candidates back in October last year. We've got 2 elections coming up in the next 12 to 13 months, one federal and one state. So I'm wondering, like, if you've got a template of how you surveyed those people and you could share it across the state, because it'll be busy having 2 elections potentially back to back. So we'll have a federal election before Easter, and then we will definitely have a state election in October next year. So there's always opportunity to be not grilling your potential politicians, but having a friendly chat with them, the way that Lucy did to me. I liked this photo of our leader, Scott Morrison, who I believe is overseas at the moment, looking fairly proud of himself, but I'm feeling proud of what we did in our 101 politics group. So I thought, I like that photo. So we think it's pretty clever, and I'm pretty proud of what the students and I put together in terms of what we wanted to learn and how we went about it, and the way that people contributed to the classes. The curriculum was pretty relaxed going into it, but then as people asked more questions and I got to learn people's interest and ability, we started to change the course a bit, and we've got one more class left to go next month. So what I like about the course is it's flexible, it's portable, so that means you can do it anywhere in Australia, online or face-to-face. It applies to people that live in the countryside or in the desert, people that live in the city, and hopefully it was accessible to most disability types. I don't have a professional background working in disability, although I am a social worker by trade. Maybe that's something that we can kind of triple check down the future to make sure that people with all kinds of disability can access this course if they wanted to. So any questions about that picture with this man here with the balding hair before I move on?
All right.
All good. Hi, Eve. Good to see
Hi,
you.
how are you? I probably have a question. I don't think he knows what he's doing, especially with the disability. I don't think he's thinking clearly. If we would not have been in COVID now, if he was put those stricter strategies and policies up for us and think about us for who we are, I do think that we would not have been at COVID now because of the fact that he hasn't put stricter policies or strategies up a year ago.
Well, I reckon we should talk about that in the next class, and we can write some letters to him. We've got his address. It's the one on the hill with the pointy thing and the flag coming out the top. We'll go and we'll let him know what we're thinking, Eve.
I was thinking of the disability as well, of course.
Yeah. All right, so this is another slide. Now, the whole reason why this came about, as Lucy was telling you, is that she met me when I was campaigning out in the field. So I actually did have one of these little ribbons that I would wear on very special occasions. And I was out there handing out flyers about myself and making phone calls to people and emailing people. And it was a bit scary, but I had some other people around me from my political party telling me how to do that and giving me ideas on how to promote myself on social media. So in the end, it was really fun. And I got to meet lots of people and hear about what people were concerned about in the area where I live. So that's one of the photos of me that I used on the campaign trail. In the end, I came second. And I gave it everything, and I'll have a go another day because I still believe in the policies that I want to promote. And it's pretty common to not win the first time. And I reckon Kathy McGowan next time can tell you all about that. She worked really, really, really hard to win her seat. And I have a lot of time and respect for her. And over here, we've got one of my political heroes. So on the right-hand side, would anyone not in my class like to tell us who this is?
Jordan, his first name's Jordan,
Yes.
and he's a senator.
Woohoo!
One of the first ones to be elected with a disability. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes. David, could you please get that person a Freddo frog? Do you have any available?
Got the Freddos, yep, they're handy.
Just throw them out
They're all
into
yours.
the audience. Yes, so he's a Western Australian man. He's 27 years old, so he's one of our youngest politicians. I think that he has cerebral palsy. He has been doing lots of work around the Disability Royal Commission, and all around is just a nice guy. And once he answered my comment on social media, so I think he's the bee's knees, right? Doesn't take much to make me happy. So he's one of my political heroes.
Good.
Jordan Steele John. So there we go. So that's this slide. I'll move on to the next one. I'll just check my notes that I said everything. Oh, the reason why I mention about social media, and Lucy knows about this too, is sometimes we look at our politicians far, far away in Canberra and we think, they don't know who I am, or how can I reach out to them? So one of the things we've been talking about in the course is how you can talk to your politician. So I've actually got some people in the class that have just walked into their local politician's office, which is very cool, not during COVID, but otherwise cool. You can call them on the phone, you can email them, you can comment on their social media posts. You might see them down at the supermarket. So they're just regular people who live in your community. They're not a special alien species, as sometimes the media would have us think. Although we might see something soon that will get you thinking otherwise. Now, this person here is currently our acting Prime Minister. So we'll just have to go easy on the bloke. He's a bit busy. But this picture got me thinking during my campaigning about how we see our politicians. So this is Barnaby Joyce. But what do we know other than that? Do we know which party he's from? Do we know what he stands for? Do we know if he's left or right, or he's from the upper or the lower house? Does he know the answer to those questions? I don't really know. So I guess it was moving beyond the caricature of the politician and actually getting down to the nuts and bolts of these people. You can see behind is sitting on a green chair, bit of a giveaway about which part of the parliament he's sitting in. I saw a hand up from, what's your name with the—
Grace.
Hi, Grace.
I was going to say, like, just proves that, like, as long as you're powerful, even if you, like, have an affair with your staffer, you can make it back to the top.
Yeah. Yes. It's pretty sad, isn't it? Like, different standards for different people in our community.
Yes, it is.
Especially men in power. So he's currently doing the top job, and yeah, his family values are a little bit distorted. So, I'll just have a look in the chat, see if there's any— no morals at all, says Karen. Doesn't— yeah, so let's move away from Barnaby so you don't have to look at his face anymore, Carleen. There we go. That's a much nicer picture. I guess, although we have on this slide, we've got a picture of someone who's a wheelchair user trying to get into a polling station. When we were, when I was going through teaching this course with the students, I didn't always teach it from a disability perspective. So I don't have a disability. I do have people in my family that I love that have disabilities, but I tried to keep it pretty neutral, because if you've got a disability, you can still be interested in topics outside that realm. And you can vote or do advocacy around something like our environment or our healthcare, or how many nuclear missiles you think we should buy. So certainly accessibility to voting is something we talked about. And if you want to get in touch with me about how you can start voting, because not everyone's voted, not everyone's had a go, and it can be a little bit intimidating. But I included these other photos that I love, these images of Australia where you can go and vote in your bathers. You can just walk up from the beach, have a sausage and bread and vote. And there's no guns, there's no security guards. It's a very safe, chilled out situation. And you can ask for help about how to do it, because those big white bits of paper, they're pretty intimidating. And you can look, there's a little picture of a kid there. You can take your kid along or your grandchild. So voting or participating in democracy is something we all should be able to access without feeling fearful of it. But it's kind of complex. And so a lot of people with or without disability shy away from it. And we vote, you know, whoever our dad voted for, we might vote for that party, or whoever our housemate tells us to vote for. So that's a lovely, lovely little image of the daggy little cardboard desks that we set up whenever there's an election. All right, how are we all going? Are we all still awake? Let me know if you've got any questions, or you can put some things in the chat. So self-advocacy. So we talked a bit about picking something that makes you upset or cross or excited and moving through that. What do we do next? So some people face real persecution or real issues around their disability or around another topic. So you can start to make noise. You can have a protest with a banner and yell a lot down the street. You can do like this woman's doing here with a microphone. She's making a submission. She's written up a big long paper and she's going to talk to maybe a tribunal or a court or a politician about what the issue is in her community. We learned about playing by the rules, which is why we've got a cheeky, I think, raccoon here. So if we speak the language of our politicians and we write letters in the way that they do, our issue is more likely to move ahead, rather than maybe throwing rocks through windows, which is not something that I encourage. Although I don't think any of the students had been doing that prior to the course. Yes, thank you, David, for that comment. I think that's really, really essential. So hopefully we can raise the amount of enrolment to vote as well. And then this is a little picture of an ink stain. So in other countries, instead of having your name ticked off on a roll, you get a little bit of ink on your finger to say, I voted, I can only vote once today. And I voted because I got my little dip in an inkwell. So voting is different in different parts of the world. And I think certainly in Australia, the right to vote, we must never take for granted, and the right to vote safely. All right, now, I think we're doing good for time. So activism, make some noise. So we've got this photo here of people, you know, going to a traditional protest, which is very hard to do safely and legally during lockdown, but hopefully our right to protest will re-emerge, because it's important that we are allowed, you know, a level of freedom of speech so that we can put forward our opinions. We had a very hot topic last night in the meeting. It was whether or not people should be penalised for keeping their tomato sauce in the fridge, because that is a national issue that we're completely divided on. Sauce in the cupboard, sauce in the fridge. You could really have a whole big fight about that. So you can make a policy on anything in this country. It's just about how many people would support your policy. And for those of you that put the sauce in the fridge, you're not going to get a lot of support on your policy. Potentially. So we celebrate the baby steps. We can sign petitions, we can write letters, we can start thinking about what matters to us. And then when something really massive faces us, like a new building in our community, or something horrible is happening at your local primary school that you want to fight, you build up your skills and your confidence. So before running to be a politician, before I met Lucy, doing something like I'm doing today, I'd be way too nervous. I'd have to get David to read out the slides for me. But now I do it by myself. Now, there's a photo there on the right hand, which is, we all love and know the 12 apostles down on the Surf Coast in Victoria. And this is an example where people in my class got excited because they were thinking about something that mattered to them, because there's a plan to drill for oil, gas, oil, something nasty. There's a plan to interrupt the ecosystem around the 12 apostles so that we can extract the gas or the oil, which is a pollutant. Not a great idea, guys. Let's harness some solar power or some wind power, which we've learned how to do. So people kind of got their back up about this and had a reaction to this situation. And I thought it was really lovely because it's a step away from, say, talking about COVID all the time, or thinking about perhaps your disability impacts all the time, where, you know, to get some kind of fresh perspective on other things that are going along in the world, to have a bit of a mental break. So there's plenty of political issues and policies to explore and kind of think about where you fit along the spectrum and what you'd like to see change in our community. So two very different pictures here that I found on the internet. I'm very good at Googling pictures. We've got some books, we've got a bit of a library, and we've got a man in detention. So I've included these two images. We've only got one more slide to go, those of you that are about to think, oh my goodness, how many slides she got. These two slides. So we have 3 levels of government. For those of you that have come to my class, they know this well. We've got our local government, which is like the council, the state government, which is Dan Andrews and his crew, and the federal government, which is Scott Morrison and his crew. At the local level, in the city of Melbourne, they decided that their library, and all of you would have a local library, City of Melbourne decided that their library was for everybody, no matter who you are, whether or not you're a citizen or a criminal, or if you've got citizenship rights or a permanent resident. They said everyone can access our library because reading books is really important. So in the City of Melbourne, there's a very small detention centre, and it's inside a hotel, and we keep what the federal government likes to call illegal immigrants. So you have the federal level of government saying these people are bad, they need to be locked up and not be told when they're going to be free. And you have the tiny little local government saying, well, we care about these people, so it's our policy to share books with them and make sure they have access to their library. So that tiny little level of government was fighting with the big level and saying, we don't care what you think, we're going to change our policy. So that one really warmed my heart because I like reading books and I like going to my library and having a look and seeing what they've got. So the power of the 3 levels of government, they don't always agree, and they can get pretty argumentative, which is good, right? We got a political question coming in. This is my last slide, and then I can see Mark's got a question. So I'm very much looking forward to your question, Mark. So because we're talking about community development, I Googled in my wisdom the principles of community development, which are down here on the left. And then I've answered kind of how the 101 politics course addressed the principles. So fight your own way for yourselves, so feel empowered. Human rights, make sure we can access the vote, make sure everyone can get into that polling booth if they need to, or be able to understand what it is that they're actually ticking on the form. Inclusion, make the pollies or the politicians work for everyone, even the noisy people and the quiet people. Hopefully voter participation increases through a course like this. Self-determination, so nothing about us without us. So listen to people with disabilities before you make policies about people with disability. And collective action. So we're all in it together. If you want to start up a petition to protect sugar gliders, you're going to need lots of people around you to keep you motivated. And before we stop listening to me rambling on, a super big thank you to all of my students and David and Lucy for making this possible. I had loads of fun, and I don't know if that's like an official outcome, but it certainly has been for me. So that's been really enjoyable, just getting together and having a chat with people from all over Victoria with different ideas. And we always, in our class, we have lots of laughs and silliness. All right.
Thanks, Emily. I think fun is a barometer of measurement. Can use. Thank you for that beautiful presentation. And you can see the sort of the warmth and the approachability that Emily offers when she is delivering content similar to that in a group. Now we're going to open up a bit of a discussion and welcome questions, but I'd like to at this stage introduce some of the participants who have come along for the ride and who are willing to have a little chat today. So we have Ellie Blackney, g'day there. And if you guys could unmute yourselves, Ellie, I can help. Oh, yep, you on there. Mark Thompson as well, up there in Ballarat in lockdown. We also have Luke Nelson.
Hi, Dave.
Noise, get some noise from. Did someone plug this into an amp? What is that?
So someone's really bad. Is that me?
No. Let me just see.
Technical things, great.
Technical things. All right, and also James Fay, if you're around and want to contribute. There you are. Thank you. Jolly good.
On that local government, with the local government and the federal government with the books, are they allowed to borrow books?
The people living in detention, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. So certainly where I live, which is in lockdown, we have something called click and collect. So I go online and choose what I want and they put them in a paper bag for me. So same with the detention centre, which is in one of the hotels in town. Maybe the librarians, fill up a box of books that they think would be useful. Probably not like, top 100 holiday destinations. They've probably got more taste than that. But yeah, when you're stuck in prison all day, reading a book is one of the very few things that people are allowed to do. It's a very tiny intervention, but as you would all know, being in some form of lockdown, the time can be just an absolute pain. So,
Brains Trust, Ellie, I think we identified as being the amplifier noise we're hearing there. Just unmute yourself when you want to pitch in. Sorry about that, but might help some of the folks there. I guess it was really interesting to hear the group talk about, and also you mentioned there, Emily, where you fit in the political spectrum, because some folks who participated in the course weren't sure of where they fit in. We're talking left, right, extreme left, extreme right, we've got center. So maybe some folks could talk about the importance of knowing where you fit in the political spectrum when you're making votes or when you're forming your opinions. Mark, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, well, that's what I enjoyed about the course. because I knew nothing about the political spectrum, left and the right, and how far extreme right and extreme left, or whether the Democrats sit right in the middle, the Liberal, the Greens sit right next to the Labor. So anyone that sort of votes Green is really giving their votes to Labor. So that was really interesting.
There was a murky world of the
Yeah,
when they give their votes to other people.
yeah. So they're really voting the other way.
Yes, which is a very tricky one to unpack. But yeah. So
Really
good to know.
And when
Yeah.
you go right out to extreme, it was still coming back.
Yeah, the preferences were a tricky one to
Yeah.
untangle. I think even Anthony Green, the ABC, sometimes find it tricky to untangle the preferences. So now something for the whole group to maybe talk about. So what did you like about the course and about the way it was delivered?
I just on that, David, I loved how it was that accessible and it was very understandable. Like, very adaptable, and also there was no judgment on what political side or what aspect you come from. It was more an understanding course, like in terms of I now know what the seats mean in terms of the colours, like the House of Representatives, the Senate, all that kind of stuff. So that's what I really enjoyed.
Thanks, Luke. What about you, Ellie?
I liked that it was easy to understand what was what, left and right and all that sort of stuff. Coloured seats and things.
So what are some things that you learned from the course, Ellie?
I'm sorry.
Like about local government, like that, who does what.
Oh yeah, we've definitely hit a Marshall stack. Thanks, Ellie. We might skip along. What about you, James? What did you like about the course?
I don't feel like socialising, sorry.
Don't feel like socialising. But it was really interesting, your contributions to the course, and you obviously are very politically aware and keep an eye on what the politicians are doing. And it was great hearing your insights to that as well.
I'd rather not be, but you have to be.
You have to be. And why do you reckon we have to be aware of what they're up to?
It's they're untrustworthy.
They're untrustworthy, that's right. So David Craig has raised a good point in the chat here. Sadly, a lot of people with disability have been supported to get an exemption to vote, despite being more than capable of knowing what they think and why they would like to, what they would like to see happen politically. I believe, Mark, you got an interesting story about voting by proxy, other people voting for other people.
Yeah, I know my father votes for my mother because she's got dementia. She's had it for about the last 5 years. So Dad just votes for Mum. And so that way he gets 2 votes for the price of 1.
Right. Well, that sounds a bit, I don't know if that's legal. That's an interesting point. I think also, Luke, you had an interesting anecdote from a buddy who was harping on about John Howard or someone, were they?
Yeah, that's right. I was talking to a friend of mine who was harping on about how John Howard is such an interesting person, and that's not the word he used. And I said to him, you know, is that his opinion, or is that his parents' opinion. He goes, "Oh no, that's my parents' opinion." And I said to him in a nice way, I said, "Look," I said, maybe it's a good idea to get some facts and understand from where you want to understand it from, because there's a lot of people out there with disabilities who get put off the voters roll or don't even go on the voters roll because there's a lot of parents out there who go, it's too hard or don't want to do it or don't want to support them. And then they get their political opinions from their loved ones or their friends or family. That's a really big issue and a concerning issue.
Absolutely, absolutely. Where do people get their political information from? If we can go around the group, maybe Ellie. Let's see if your mic's working. Where do you get your political information from?
I got taught me
Oh dear.
Labour is for the poor man, was for the rich man. I was taught.
That's tricky for us to hear. We're having mic troubles. We've got to send over a technician. What about you, James? Where do you get your information from?
I suppose my parents were left wing, so I had a look at that. I used my brain. Call a spade, no matter who it is.
So there's a level of being able to read between the lines, we call it, when you can read a whole bunch of different sources and make your own opinion. It's very important. Do you think it's easy to get objective information about politics and what politicians are up to?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I do, but I don't think it'll be easy for most people.
Yeah, it's quite hard, isn't it? Yeah.
More education, Anyway.
Sorry, can I just
Grace?
say, I think that social media has made it a lot harder for people to get unbiased information about political issues, because people who are into like a certain topic, they will click on those stories, and those type of stories are the only ones that come up, and they become, kind of, that's all they see, and that's all they think about politically wise.
Yeah.
With social media.
Yeah, and those voices are getting louder, aren't they? They're kind of amplified by social media. And really hard. I mean,
it's
really hard
what you believe in and what you feel, and what if you're passionate about the Great Ocean Road and someone's running for the Great Ocean Road, that's what you'll vote for. If you're passionate about that or that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's hope that they keep to their promises when they promise you new roads and things. So Ellie's mentioned in the chat, my mum taught me Labor for the poor man, Liberal for the rich man, which I guess is quite a succinct way of putting that. I think, very good. So I guess, let's put that back in the context of our work. So we've been learning stacks of things about politics, local, state government. How does that help our community development work or our advocacy work? The knowledge of how that works and who to go to for what issue. A little bit of an answer. Mark?
I suppose it helps knowing which department to go to when there's a problem arising. So if it's a council problem, you go to your local council. If it's a state problem, you go to your state member. And if it's a federal problem, you go to your federal member. And that goes whether they're in power or out of power.
Yeah, that's right. So
that's what I do here in town.
Yeah. So if you can identify an issue that we want change and that through peer action work is a great way to have that discussion through peer groups and identify what the issues are you might want to address in your community. Then you can figure out what level of government you might approach. Some things are a little bit blurry, but that's been very helpful to know that. Very good. We had a discussion the other day about folks with disabilities perhaps not voting as much or not being discouraged to vote. What are your thoughts on that?
I think just on that, I think it needs to change. I think we need to, and this course is wonderful for that. I think we need to encourage people with disabilities to stand up and make sure they have an opinion, so that when so stories like I was just telling before don't happen as often, because we're all citizens, we're all in society, so everyone deserves a chance to have their opinion heard.
And also this course gets around more because it's more adaptable, more people can learn it, and it travels more.
That's right. Maybe we could open up to everyone in the group and have a nice big chat with mics off if everyone's patient enough to wait for their turn to speak. Maybe put your hand up. But do people feel like they're empowered to vote? Here's Paul with a hand up.
Can I ask a question, David? Sorry, just first come off the rank. We had a premier in this country who said recently that I'll decide when I need to be accountable. And I just wanted to put that to that idea that a politician's going to decide when they need to be accountable. And I just wondered if Mark could respond with the hang on, if Mark could respond with the story about Matheson and the doorbell and accountability, and if Emily, if you had any comments about that. And the other thing to Emily too is that the refugee picture is really interesting, I think, because that's been an unbelievably long campaign and people have fought it for years, and with not much outcome in lots of ways, but people keep fighting. So how you keep fighting those long campaigns when things seem pretty bleak. So, but go to Mark first. I wonder about, can you tell us about Matheson and accountability and the doorbell?
Person with a disability in a wheelchair, there was a step at the door, and
of where?
The federal member's door, and he could never get in. So we always used to throw a stone or something at the door. And so they finally installed a doorbell, a brass doorbell on the wall, on a bluestone wall. And that doorbell still works. Then they used to bring out a ramp so we could move into Catherine King's office. And she's still empowered today.
Because of him. Sorry, Mark, who is this man? Tell us quickly about this man.
Matheson. He did a lot of advocacy work and campaigning work around Ballarat, Melbourne, changed a lot of Southern Cross station around, wrote to a lot of ministers down Southern Cross. Nothing sort of got in his way. He just had an approach that was wild.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
Well, that goes back to the throwing the stones thing. Maybe it can be helpful in certain instances.
Well, there was no way
open a door for you. Yeah.
Can I make a comment about the comments about Polly's being untrustworthy?
Sure, we'll get back to you.
So, sorry, is that okay?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah. So I guess it got me thinking, sort of talking about the untrustworthiness and holding, as Paul's saying about, you know, who holds them to account, who decides whether they're being held to account. You know, I can give an example within neighbourhood houses that in a previous government, one of the election promises was that neighbourhood houses would have their funding increased. And it was becoming really clear during their term, as you're getting towards the end of that government's term, that they weren't meeting that promise. So we all banded together and we campaigned, we did a letter writing campaign to the government to say, hey, you promised that you would do this and you haven't, and this is what we want. And it was a successful campaign, and they actually did keep to their promise of an increase in funding. So I guess I just wanted to relay that, you know, we do need to be looking at the promises that they're making to us if we're voting for them, and making sure that they are being trustworthy, they're being held to account, and there are ways of doing that.
Absolutely. And especially if they're the reason we voted for them. Brooke, another question, or are we saying goodbye?
No, I'm asking a question.
Jolly good.
Just want to ask a question to Emily. Emily, just want to ask you, how can I contact Scott by, can I get Scott's email address?
Yes, you can, Brooke. You can Google it. And you'll be able to find, it's usually at the Australian Parliament House website. But if I get a breather today, I'll paste it in the chat and we can all send him an email. But also, if you do have a federal government issue, so a whole of country issue, getting in touch with your local federal representative. So for people like me and Luke, that is Katethwaites. So depending on where you live, you'll have your own.
We live in Dana Heads.
Where, sorry?
In Dana Heads.
Oh, in Dana Heads.
Yeah.
I don't know who the person is there, but it's certainly
Karangamite. Is it Sarah? What's her name? Oh, I think she lost actually.
Sarah Henderson, I think, is
Henderson.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, but all of us should be able to find out who our representative is at all three levels of government without too much difficulty, and we can contact all three of them via email and sometimes telephone. But yeah, I'll try and get Scott's email address for you, Brooke, and you can, you know.
Because he came on today because we had lots of people on the TV today, lots of coppers in Melbourne on TV. They're trying to get the supporters, protesters to go away. That was on TV today.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Well, I'm sure Scotty from marketing will appreciate an email. Nia or Nia, sorry if I got the pronunciation wrong. Yep.
That's okay. It's Nia. I was just, Mark's story about the doorbell and the ramp, the detail that struck me most was, why did they take the ramp away? Why did this person?
It away. It's
Sorry?
still there.
Ah, I thought they came out when
No,
a
it comes
person.
in and out every time someone wants it.
Yeah, but why? Why do they have to have special arrangements? Why can't these people just enter and go out when they want to? Why do they have to ask to be let in?
Because it's on a heritage.
That I'm sure arrangements could be made.
You don't know Ballarat.
No, I don't. But
and it's just on that. It's very hard to do stuff to heritage buildings. It's very difficult and very hard fight to do that.
It's also being a disabled person. It's very hard to access buildings.
Yes, of course.
So what's more important? I'm not asking for the foundations of the building to be disrupted at all. Why I just don't see that there would be some kind of barrier in the way of making it accessible.
Good point.
That's just me.
No, I agree, 100%.
Great, good point. We still have a lot of work to do out there, don't we, in the communities?
I do.
So there's a course like this, and Emily, you can join in too. But there are other participants here as well. I mean, does this course make it easier to maybe conceive of how you can address your problems in community or issues that are raised through peer action work? Have you found it to be helpful?
It can be.
It can be. Yep.
Yes, I've also got a letter from my local MP. He's a federal MP called Julian Hill regarding people with disabilities. I attached it to the chat if anyone wants to have a look at it.
Very good. What was that in relation to, Judy?
It was just try and read it out. Just have to find it in here.
Did you contact him first?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes, I did, David. Yes, it says, "Dear Judy, just a note to thank you for your letter and suggestions. It's very helpful when people take the time to speak up and share their roles and experiences. I've noted that you've said in relation to disabilities and disability care. Thank you for your ongoing, thank you again, and please take care." But this was done in July.
Okay. So you feel like you were heard there from your query with Julian Hill?
Yes.
You felt like that was an adequate response to your...
Perfect.
Okay. Yep. There you go. So we have a bit of a response there from your local MP. That's great. Has anyone else written letters to their local MP?
That's a good idea, though.
Few people have. Yep.
I think it's a good idea, especially talking to the government in the old age care. I know who the MP is, so I can probably start there too.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I mean, there's one question that sort of can sometimes come up is, how do you feel like you can sort of hang in there and keep fighting when change seems insurmountable or impossible, Emily? I mean, there's sometimes, these things like ramps, we're constantly talking about, these changes, but yet nothing happens, or they happen very slowly, or we write letters, or politicians make promises, and we're still got so much change to happen. How do you hang in there when the task seems so big?
I'll go out to the garden and I dig a few holes, David.
Oh yeah, it's a target practice.
I celebrate the wins. So I know the NDIA isn't perfect, or the NDIS, but I think there's improvements on what it used to be. So maybe looking back in history about, in the past, we didn't have that. We didn't have disability rights. So counting our wins would be one strategy, David. The other one would be about baby steps. So my area of activism is about climate emergency, and there are times when it cripples me and I just kind of lie under my doona and think I can't do anything, and then the next day I get out of bed and I go and pick up a bag of rubbish, or I run for parliament. I do what I can do within my means. I can't afford to buy an electric car, but I can afford to grow a few herbs, or I could use a bit less plastic. But it is very overwhelming, and so the other thing I do is surround myself with people that have the same ideas.
Fantastic answer. Well, that's the backbone of our peer work, isn't it? To work together, to share ideas, to build a network. Oh, here we go. Brooke's taking charge. Mark with your hand up.
Sorry.
That's all right. You're a hard taskmaster. Off you go, Mark.
I thought Luke had a question.
I kept knocking the raise hand button thing. So don't, yeah.
Yeah, I've been on 2 campaigns. The one that lasted 6 years at a picture theatre in the same street that the Catherine King's in, and we finally won that. And also on one now that we've been on it for probably 3 years and been to VCAT twice, and we've won that twice. So just have to keep on going back to VCAT till they finish it, their orders.
And that cinema campaign went for about 20 years, didn't it, Mark?
6.
No, it was going way, way back, if it's the same one I'm thinking of. Back in the early 2000s.
Mm.
Deb Tassie was involved with it.
Yeah.
But even the campaign, like the independent assessments for the NDIS, I mean, that's a massive campaign that, you know, the NDIA thought that it was going to be, we thought it was going to be a little bit hard, but at the end of the day, we won. This is where campaigning is so powerful to stand up and be included in this kind of environment.
David Henderson.
Yep.
There's a comment in the chat from David Craig.
There is. We'll get to that. But there was a great session. It sounds like you guys are across it as well in terms of the strategies you can do to make some noise or to create some change.
Yeah,
what sort of strategies? What
Yes.
kind of things did you do to kind of?
I didn't do anything, but I can look
Hang
into.
on, Eve. Mark and Luke were talking about their activism there. So what sort of strategies did you use to create that change over such a long period of time?
It was letter writing, solicitors, letter writing, going to the cinema, putting no access, those old things David Craig had, no accessibility, no access.
Yeah.
On their doors, they'd tear them off. They used to have companion card accepted. Then they tore that off because I didn't want companions going in using their cinema.
Did you approach all these strategies with a group? Were there a group of you discussing these strategies and what to do?
There had to be 6 to do a class action.
Okay. Yep. So you
to
supported
do a
each other.
Class action, you have to have 6.
And you supported each other as obstacles came, and you figured out a way to overcome them, and then regrouped. Yep.
Yeah.
Great work. So
We're
those
doing that
strategies
still with the railway station.
still going with the railway station.
With 6.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a question. Just going back to Carlene's question. You'd like to comment about your state poly who covers Mildura to Maryborough. And then Emily's responded with Ali Cooper, independent. I'm not sure if Emily knows much about Ali Cooper, Carlene. Did you have a specific question, Carlene, about that particular member or what they are or aren't doing for the community?
No, David, I just want to know, because the area is so large.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to know how do the politicians ensure that they're actually representing their voters?
Wow, good question. How do the elected officials know that they're representing their voters? And do they care that they're representing the voters?
That's such a good question, Colleen.
Great, Colleen.
And I think you could ask that of every single politician, because although, is it Ali Kappa that's your representative?
No, it's actually Yana Pullman.
Right. I keep thinking about areas in, say, Western Australia and Queensland where they would have even bigger areas. Mildura to Maryborough is a lot of space and a lot of different farmers and towns, and you've got the river in there. I would hope that they try their best. But I guess the squeaky wheels, or the people that donate lots of money to that political party, they might get their issues heard, or putting out fires, not literal fires, but political fires. We talked last night about the dead fish in the Murray River. I guess people focus on certain things, but then they may not be aware that the farmers have got high suicide rates, or that they're battling with, low purchases of their crops in COVID. Like the strawberry farmers can't sell their strawberries. But I think with, the charismatic politicians, I think those ones that know how to at least pretend like they're listening, they're probably successful. But
that's really pathetic.
Yeah. But I guess for any politician, if you're representing old people, young people, school children, people with a psychiatric illness, war veterans, small business owners, annoying people, nice people, it's a lot of people to cater for, isn't it? People that wear red glasses, they're the trickiest to cater for.
Okay.
Lucy's got them on too.
Kind of common thread.
GJ.
Does anyone else have any questions? I think, Eve, you were going to make a comment or suggestion. No? Okay. Any other questions? We got Ron?
Not a question, it's just a comment.
Yep.
I think bureaucrats and politicians and all those sort of people tend to forget that they're part of the public service.
Sure.
So no matter who elects them in, they're supposed to represent their community. And I think sometimes pollies need to be reminded of that as well as bureaucrats.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway,
good
that's
point.
just a comment.
Thanks, Ron. No, that's right. They do get lost. They get lost in media cycles and spin cycles and Nia?
Nia.
Nia,
That's
sorry.
okay.
Nia.
That's
Sorry,
okay.
my bad.
I just looked up. There's 4.41. Hang on just a sec. Oh, where is it? There's 1 in 6, 18% of people in Australia, or about 4.4 million people, have a disability. So I don't think that's like too small a community to
Sure.
have a say.
That's great. And we're talking about family members who care too, who don't have disabilities. There's a massive circle who care.
The whole of society is impacted.
That's right. But I guess the point we're making is that even if you are a minority group, you should still be listened to as as much as someone who is a majority group, and have a voice at the table. Good point. Good point there. Okay. So, sorry. Someone else?
Sorry, I'm not very good at the hand up thing.
That's okay.
I would say that in the past, like people with a disability, a lot of them, it was like a lot more institutions, it was a lot more hidden. And I think like it was much easier for people to say, oh, like that doesn't relate to me. I'm not going to help fight for their issues, but it's much more open now. And I think the community is much stronger probably as a whole in working together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The fabric of society is better when everyone has a voice and everyone can stand at the table and say what they want. Good point. Thank you. Was there one more wavy hand out there? No. Well, maybe we can thank Emily and Lucy. Thank you for getting this course up and supporting the course, and for your time today. I believe we might close with some words from David Craig.
We've got a bit more to go.
Or Paul Dunn.
No, I'm not closing. We've got to do some information sharing. We're going to have a little bit of a discussion. So yeah.
Great, fantastic. Well, let's
about the network.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely.
But you can close this stuff officially now, David. It's over to you to close it, and then throw to David Craig, and he'll take it from there.
Great. Yeah. So let's thank Emily and Lucy. Thank you for your time today. Thanks for being part of the course, and for supporting peer action work. It certainly is good to have supporters and partners in the community, especially ones that are committed to the cause. It's fantastic stuff. Thank you very much. Yay. Yay.
Thanks, David, and our speakers and presenters. It's fantastic, and it's just lovely to see a conversation of politics hitting the road, not just talk. There is a lot of talk in politics, but there's not often a lot of action. And I think what we've heard today is it's the action that makes the difference, and understanding the processes and knowing how to turn the right knobs or taps to put pressure on, or to provide support to people that are trying to do the right thing. I keep thinking at my in my 5 kilometres of walking area, I get to include this beautiful place called the Mullum Valley in North Ringwood. And the Mullum Valley was nearly destroyed by a freeway that Jeff Kennett was going to build. And a close friend of mine who lived near that valley and was an active nature lover, an activist, political activist, her and a very small band of people basically forced the government, who had no interest in spending extra money, to dig a really deep tunnel to go under the valley and preserve it. And to me, it was just a really big lesson in how people who get active and use good strategies can make change. And yes, we hear about the strategies around refugees and asylum seekers struggling to really get much of a grasp on public policy and thinking, and that's really sad because it's such a tragic and really big issue. But I think all through we see different examples, good examples around us of good leadership, good community activism, and I think back to around about that same time, Purple Sage was a movement created by a group of policy people concerned about the loss of democracy in Victoria, and they formed this movement called Purple Sage, where they tried to meet with and make their local members accountable. And what they say in their I suppose evaluation of that is that when you meet face to face and you make your politician human to you, but also you human to them by meeting them face to face and getting to know them and expecting them to be accountable to listening to you at least, even if they don't agree. And it was quite a powerful process in reminding us at the risk of losing democracy if we weren't careful. So I think another good example, and I suppose I'd just like to reinforce what Nia said around the 4 million voters. People with disabilities have a tremendous amount of power to change policy and legislation if they get together and organise themselves, because they do represent quite a significant proportion of the community. In fact, I think there was launched, and I haven't heard much since, We the 15, a campaign internationally to try and bring to public awareness that 15% of the world's population are people with a lived experience of disability. And some people would say it's higher, some people say lower, but that's a fairly conservative figure. But that's a significant number of people that need to be included in all kind of policy and government action. And probably just finally finish with an acknowledgement of Merle Mitchell, who it was just announced passed away in the last few days, I think. any of you that watch The Drum, if you're into politics, you should watch The Drum. You get to hear different views. You'll see left and right and centre. Probably not too much of the real extremes, but it is interesting. And Merle Mitchell, during the Royal Commission into Aged Care, was still an activist from her nursing home where she was living, and such a powerful advocate for the lived experience of life in a nursing home. Merle has been an activist all her life, and she acted in her local community in Dandenong area, set up neighbourhood houses, the Springvale Citizens Advice Bureau, all sorts of things. And I think I realised now, a very active politician in local council must have been her husband, Eric, who was active in days when we were doing some work down in Dandenong. And, I think to go back and reclaim our capacity to be active and make a difference in our local communities and to drive that kind of thinking up through to state and federal level, as Emily's been talking about, is really important. And we think to do that, we need to have a really good grasp or a very good grip on how change can happen and to look at some of the things that have helped make changes. I think Luke mentioned the campaign against the independent assessments. The campaign actually for an NDIS was quite a big campaign, and it did show the voting power of people with disabilities when their families and their support providers come together with people with disabilities to campaign for an issue. And probably sometimes then we fall apart and we get, fractured and fragmented, and we're not as effective as we could be. But one of the things that I think is really crucial to the future success of the inclusion of people with disabilities in our community is how we support peer-led work. We have some groups here today, from some that are connected with Valid, some that are connected with Brain Injury Matters, and other brain injury support organisations. We have some people here that work in support provision and support coordination, advocates, activists. It's a good cross-section of people, but we need to have a lot more people. There are a lot of peer support groups out there working in their own little patch and not collaborating. And we're really keen to find out how you think the Inclusive Community Development Network could become an umbrella group or a network or an alliance for those of us that want to see more action in local communities by people with disabilities having a say, providing leadership, getting involved in political activity, becoming politically literate and skilled, using various strategies to make a difference in their communities. And we've seen the power of that in some of our local peer advocacy work. But we're interested to see how people think we could really strengthen the Inclusive Community Development Network. Our proposal at this stage is to invite some people that are interested to put their hand up and say, I'd like to form part of a working party. But just now, if you've got any ideas, instead of breaking into small groups, Paul suggested we might just stay in one group. If you've got any ideas or things you'd like to suggest we could do to get better organised and to bring more groups together, this is your chance to maybe put up some ideas or make some suggestions.
David?
Yes, Brooke?
I've got one.
Good, go.
Thank you, David. Okay. We just want to give more people in our groups to come and join our peer action group. Come and join our peer action group. Get some more people to come along and help us to join our new peer action group meetings. It's every second Friday at 10 to 1, and the person that you need to talk to is Jana, because she's in charge, and Dave Craig is. We just want to get some more people to come along to our things, and we do lots of social Sundays. Every second Sunday, every social Sunday, we go out for lunch. We see lots of people there, and we enjoy doing our groups.
Thanks, Brooke. That's great. So there's actually a really political issue, Brooke, because one of the things we've discovered is that, and I'm sure there are a lot of people with disabilities who would love to be involved in this kind of work. It's exciting. It builds skills and confidence. We've got some video, some of the guys here today on video talking about how empowering it has been to be involved in this work. And yet our experience is there are still too many people with disabilities trapped in day programs and other sort of activity programs that don't really get out and become part of their community, and their service providers are doing very little to support that. So there's a political issue. What are the issues? Why is that a problem? How do we know what the issues are? How do we create a successful campaign to make some change? And I think December the 1st forum is probably going to be sort of a a chance for us to bring some of those issues together. But that's a really good one, Brooke.
And Yana just put down in the comments about our Facebook page. He said anyone wants to look at it.
So, yeah, we need to encourage more people to get involved. Anyone else?
I think your question is, how do we like get the type of political literacy course that Emily has just taught to this group of people? How do we get that more widespread, not just among people with a disability, but as the community as a whole?
So there's an important.
I feel like, you know, it's an issue among all of society where, you know, you turn 18 and everyone's like, you can vote now, and you have like, unless you've taken certain subjects in high school, you probably don't have much idea. So, yeah.
Excellent. So the whole idea of some political literacy education at a level that people can understand and accept, because politics is a bit of a turn off to a large number of people in the community because they see it as something that's inaccessible and out of reach, and something where they can't make a difference. Emily.
I don't know if it's down the right track, David, but maybe having a refresher about some of this content leading up to a federal or a state election. And I'd be happy to either come along or provide just a few dot points. The other thing that people can do wherever they live in Victoria, let's say you wanted to know more about the Labor Party and their political ideas and their policies, you could actually reach out to, say, the Geelong chapter of the Labor Party, and they would send someone out to your group. And of course they would say, this is why you should vote Labor, blah, blah, blah. But at least then you get their point of view, and then you might invite someone from other parties as well. Because of course you often get to the polling booth and you're like, oh, what does this even mean? What are franking credits? I don't know the answer to that, by the way.
Good. So I think that's a really good one when the topic is hot, to do that, to prepare people. I must also just say the Victorian Electoral Commission, and I'm not sure if the Australian Electoral Commission has as well, but the Victorian Electoral Commission has done a lot of work to make voting accessible and easy. And, you know, so it's really sad that so many people, particularly people with intellectual disabilities or cognitive impairments, have perhaps been encouraged or discouraged by their families to get enrolled, and they've found some way of getting exempted. And we've been talking with a group. They want to make changes in their community, but they haven't shown the determination to get themselves enrolled as a voter. So we're trying to make that point. But I think, you know, some further education and training across a whole range of local areas would be really good. Any other thoughts just about, you know, how we bring together so many more peer groups? There are a lot of groups working across Victoria on their own little patch who aren't here today. How might we make coming together more attractive to some of those groups?
David, there is an issue with, you know, this work and making sure it's supported. And I think that's something we can come together around, and maybe that's the idea of the December forum around that. You know, collaboration is around, you know, making like with some of this work, it's just relying on very short-term funding. So, you know, how we make a noise about this work, and it's important, and celebrate the things that are being achieved, I think is important. And we'd probably be looking for a little bit of a working group for that, maybe coming together for that forum. But that could be one way we could start to bring some people together between these sessions to actually help us develop an agenda for that. Session would be good. So if anyone's interested, if anyone's interested out there, so we could have a bit of a meeting.
So Paul, can we suggest that people are interested, they send an email to paul@valid.org.au. Paul can collect a list of people that are interested, maybe forming a bit of a working group.
In regards to political awareness, I find, especially in the PAG groups, if they're not already engaged, I have trouble communicating why this is so important. And I don't know if anyone else has the same problem or if it's just me. But trying to hold their interest when I'm talking about politics, they seem to just glaze over. Like, and if they're not already there, I really struggle.
Yeah, I I think the Victorian Electoral Commission does a really good job of coming out and doing a fake election. They actually put up boxes. So it might enliven it a bit to actually have them come and do it as a process. You know, they might vote on whether you want chocolate cake instead of tomato soup cake or whatever, you know. But they have a really good process for coming and teaching people through the actual practical process. What happens when you vote? How do you get registered? So it might be really good to do something more active like that, because I know talking about it does people's eyes glaze over a bit.
Even I glaze over half the time, and I already vote.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can only listen to a politician bang on for so long.
It's really important to think that what we're actually doing here is political. We're actually about putting together the kind of collaborative networks that can speak and have a loud voice. And, you know, there is always a case, if the more people you've got involved behind you, the more likely it is you'll be listened to. Then we have a responsibility and a duty, I think, in our political activity to, you know, engage and connect with and bring people together to share ideas, debate ideas, and work out what they agree on what they think they should lobby for. Because even that's a bit of a process that's political sometimes. We all have different opinions on things, but there are some things we agree on. And some of the things around human rights and that are really quite important. You know, they are things we don't disagree on. Mark Thompson?
Yeah, that's to answer Anne's question, that's probably why Emily's course was so good. It was explained it so well.
Yeah. Yep.
And it told you how, taught you how to vote. And it was a fun way to learn how to do it. And, you know, and you could, and we could fight over tomato sauce, putting it in the cupboard or in the fridge.
Yeah.
You know.
So I think there's two messages there. One is people need to know the actual mechanics of voting. How do you get registered? How do you do all that? But they also then need to understand.
But we learned
what am I voting about?
Stuff, upper and lower house, and
how all that works.
What colours, red and green house.
Yep. Thanks, Mark.
So my idea with when you're talking about connecting with other networks, and I think one of the reasons networks don't connect with each other is they don't know about each other, or they don't know what, you know, what information. So it's often about just sharing that information about what you actually do. And I think, you know, it's often either word of mouth that you get invited to a network, or people think that the network is going to be quite exclusive, or they don't have the qualifications or the right, you know, title to actually attend a network. So I think, you know, there might be something about, opening up networks to other people, or inviting them, or, you know, we've got so many people here today and everyone probably sits on another network. We could all share those networks with each other and invite each other to those networks. And, you know, some of the networks that I sit on, I know they definitely, some of the participants would definitely would like to hear about how to engage with their local politicians, or to actually, you know, stand up and do something. Because a lot of people, you know, have the common in a network, say, you know, I sit on a lot of housing networks, there's common issues around housing, and they don't really know how to approach and make change. So it would be some really good crossovers that you could connect in with each other. So maybe at the very basic, an information sheet on what you do, send that out to networks, and they send the same back, and everyone's got that flyer. Yeah.
Good point. Thanks, Christiane. So we'll do that. We probably did that a little bit early on in the early days, and we've stopped doing it. So I think having a little flyer that says what we stand for, how we work, and who's invited, and what the purpose is would be really useful. We'll try and get that out to everyone on the list to share, and you can send that around. Paul?
I was just saying, one of the things that people say, don't talk about sport, religion, or politics. I think so. One of the things about the course is that people are able to come together and talk about politics and all get on well. I think that's a really important thing, that that, you know, that we can come together and have a differences or whatever, and still treat one another civilly. And we had a discussion in the planning meeting for this. Now, whether if people were from the very far left and the very far right, that might have happened. Who knows? But maybe it wouldn't have. But at least, you know, with the group that came along, it was all very civilised and courteous, which is really important.
Righto, I think that pretty much brings us to the end of that bit. So I'll just hand back to David to wind us up, and thank you very much for taking time, and we look forward to inviting some of you into to put your hands up to start working with us on building the network, and hopefully it'll become a force for influence and impact into the future. Thanks very much.
David, Peter wants to talk.
No.
Peter Person, great.
How can I resist that wonderful invitation? I did want to mention to people, just picking up on Paul's comment about the state of funding, particularly for peer support groups, that a few groups had a meeting on Monday, I think it was, with the Department of Social Security, headed up by the section that now controls the ILC funding, Sarah Guys. So that was quite a useful first meeting. So I'm happy to provide more details about that for other groups who are receiving or want to receive funding through the ILC, to kind of bring them up to speed, because there's just been a complete dearth of information in that regard.
That'd be great, Peter. That's such an important thing to be involved with.
Okay, well, thank you all for attending. Thank you, Emily and Lucy, and our beautiful participants in the course, and everyone for your participation generally in the sector and at the ICDN today. And lovely to see your faces. Good luck out there.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, David. Thank you, David, and thank you, Paul. Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Lucy.
Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome, Judy.